Said I wouldn't hop on the Corona train, yet here I am. What's up, family? I'm Divya. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now, as you probably know, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. Anyway, there's not much more I can tell you about the virus or the pathogenicity of the virus in humans, and like myself, I'm sure you all are probably well informed and tired of hearing about it, so let's just put that aside for a minute. So to give you all a little bit of a background, I am currently a third-year student of veterinary medicine. I have a background in pure science, having graduated my undergraduate degree with a Bachelor of Science in Biotechnology, Chemistry, and Zoology, which were my three majors. And I take an immense interest in One Health and epidemiology, which I will get into later exactly what that is because it is relevant to this video. But this is just to kind of put aside the who the hell are you and why should I believe you component of your questions. So as the situation with the spread of the virus continues to get under control, there's increasing speculation on how to prevent such outbreaks from happening in the future. So this is really important because it helps us improve public health, it helps us manage and control the spread of zoonotic diseases better in the future, and overall it's just better for everybody. However, the first people who are put under questioning under such circumstances are our wild animals. Now they look at us like, bruh, I don't understand what you're saying. And that's where people like me hop in to try and explain and give you all an alternative perspective on what you might have heard, such that we can all make an educated decision and have an educated perspective on what's happening in the world right now, and not just look at it from a unilateral anthropocentric point of view, because honestly we're not the only people living on this planet, and I think it's safe to say that we're all realizing that right now, is that we're going to have to start looking around and caring about everything a little bit more than we have thus far. Okay, so how do animals fit in to this whole predicament? For the purpose of staying topical, we're only going to talk about coronavirus in this video. Otherwise, I know that we've had Ebola, we've had H1N1, we've had avian influenza, we've had so many outbreaks of animal-related zoonotic diseases, and we can just go down that rabbit hole, and that's going to turn into more of a lecture than a video, so let's not do that. For the purpose of staying topical, we're only going to talk about coronavirus in this video, and how that links to wildlife and the wildlife markets and urban, peri-urban wildlife in general. Thus far, we've had 3 coronavirus outbreaks, okay? So the first one was severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, which occurred in 2002-2003, and then it was followed by a MERS-CoV, which is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus, which occurred in 2012, and now we have our darling COVID-19, which is coronavirus disease 2019. Perfect. Okay, so let's look at the 3 viruses separately and how it links to humans and wildlife. So if you look at SARS, which is our first severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, it was initially thought to be associated with the consumption, handling, or cooking of civet cat meat in the wildlife, from the wildlife meat markets. Later on, studies showed that the reservoir host was actually bats, in particular the Chinese rufous horseshoe bat. And from the bats, it went to the civet cats and the raccoons that were then consumed by humans via the trade of wildlife meat. Okay, now let's look at MERS-CoV. This virus was transmitted to humans via the bats in Hong Kong. However, studies showed that the major reservoir host for this virus was dromedary camels. Transmission to humans could occur via contact with a camel, a bat, or contact with fellow infected humans. Okay, now let's look at COVID-19. How the hell did this come into our population? So the initial cluster of patients was linked to a wet seafood market from Wuhan district, China, as we all know. But this virus very quickly adapted to human transmission, and that's why it's become such an issue, right? So when they isolated the virus and typed its genome, they realized that the virus shares a very close genetic similarity to the SARS virus that was isolated from the Rhinolophus affinis bat. We then found that the virus is also very similar to the coronavirus that is found in pangolins. So we don't really know yet how this transmission has occurred and what genetic recombination has taken place in order for this virus to affect humans. I mean, there are some theories to suggest that convergent evolution took place between the pangolin virus and the bat virus to create the human virus. So, but none of this has been ascertained. So, are animals really to blame for this whole outbreak of zoonotic diseases? Blame is a really strong word. Blame means that someone has done something wrong. Now, if you look at even the virus is doing what every single living being on this planet is trying to do. It's trying to survive and reproduce. Now, every single time a virus replicates, it modifies its genome ever so slightly and then exists in an amalgamation of viral units that are all slightly different in genotype. And this is called a viral quasi-species. Now, every time the virus replicates, it's tweaking its genome. It's kind of making these small changes until suddenly one day, lo and behold, it's able to infect another host. Viruses are actually dependent intracellular parasites. They cannot exist. They are not alive outside of a living cell. So viruses will often infect organisms in such a way that they don't elicit a full-fledged immune response. And this is so that the health of the animal is sustained, because if the animal dies or if the human dies, the virus dies. It needs a living host. So therefore, viruses have something called reservoir hosts. And animals, in particular wildlife, are reservoir hosts for hundreds of viruses. Rodents, bats, cats, every single wild animal species is hosting a number of viruses in their latent state, and they are not showing signs of clinical infection. So to give you an example, a lot of humans, we carry the herpes virus, but it's subclinical or asymptomatic. How many of you have had cold sores before? This is when your immune system is slightly suppressed and the virus then starts to manifest clinically. And then the minute you get your immune system back on track, it'll go away and it won't pop back up for a while. So while coronavirus is relatively novel and doesn't occur too often in human species, it's very, very common amongst animal species. You have feline coronaviruses, canine coronaviruses, equine coronaviruses. You have coronaviruses in all different animals, and veterinarians deal with them quite frequently. We vaccinate against them, and it's something that we're all very aware about. Now, the virus doesn't just jump. It doesn't just slide into our DMs and say, hey, I'm going to infect you. This is a process that occurs over years. It occurs over a very long period of time before the virus manages to crack the code for another species. And yes, more often than not, there has to be direct contact of the infected material with our own body, either via ingestion or bite, and so on and so forth. I find a lot of parents now complaining about wanting their students and school areas to be rid of bats or possums or any wild species that could potentially infect their kids. Now, these concerns are valid. However, trust in your wildlife officials and your public health officials to know what they're doing, because while you might not agree with their method of action, it's founded in a lot of research, whereas yours might be more founded in emotion than logic. So what's the solution, right? So we obviously have to develop vaccines. Now, The difficulty with the coronavirus is the really short incubation period. For COVID-19, the incubation period is 14 days, and it's extremely contagious. So it jumps from human to human really, really fast. So, and this further exacerbates the need for quick vaccine development. Now, what are some of the things that we can learn from the vaccines that have been developed in the veterinary world? So number one is vaccine type. What kind of vaccine are we going to use? Now, this is a lot more complicated than just, are we going to use a live vaccine, a live attenuated vaccine, or a kill vaccine? There's also different types of vaccines in terms of subunit vaccines and DNA vaccines, etc., etc. So we have to weigh out the pros and the cons of each type of vaccine, see what kind of immunogenicity it's eliciting in the patient, and then work from there onwards to try and perfect the concoction, if you know what I mean. For example, the live attenuated vaccine, it's much safer to use than the live vaccine, but then it doesn't confer 100% immunity. So this is a pro and a con that you have to weigh out before you decide to put this vaccine out on market. Number two is you also have to consider the severity of the infection. In canines, we use an inactivated vaccine. The efficacy of the vaccine is questionable, but the infection often manifests quite mildly, so it serves the purpose. It's not something we're very concerned about, and it's doing its job for now. Now, cross-reactivity, this is a big one, and this is one of the major things that we have to consider when we're developing a vaccine. So for example, in cats, the feline coronavirus vaccine is thought to sensitize the cat against feline infectious peritonitis. So if and when the animal does get infected with feline infectious peritonitis, the infection manifests a lot more severely than if the animal had not been vaccinated. So this is another major thing to consider. Maternal antibodies. This is an interesting strategy that we use in veterinary medicine. To give you an example, in sows and dams, which are female pigs and female cows that are about to give birth, we vaccinate them for transmittable enteritis and bovine coronavirus respectively, such that we can confer immunity via maternal antibodies that are delivered through the colostrum to the calves and the baby piglets. This is also important to consider because when we're developing a vaccine for humans, if a woman is pregnant and we give her the vaccine, how is this going to manifest and how is this going to affect the fetus? All of these things are really important to consider. So make sure that you understand how much time it takes for an effective vaccine and a safe vaccine to be developed before you jump at public health authorities to do a faster job. So my advice to protect yourself would be, number one, if you do come in contact with a wild animal, whether it's a bat or a ferret or a possum, don't handle it if you don't know how to. Call the wildlife authorities in your area and let them do their job. Number two, if you do get bitten or scratched by any wild animal, this could be a bird, this could be an insect, this could be a tiger for all I care, immediately seek medical intervention. This is not an option. You have to seek medical intervention. Number three, if you have thought about consuming or have consumed exotic meat, I would do my research on what my health concerns are following this decision. And obviously I'm a vegan, so I don't advocate the consumption of meat in general. But if it is something that you're going to do, you need to know the risks that you're taking. So as humans continue to grow and our population continues to thrive, animals are running out of space. They are existing more and more in congruity with us and with our civilizations. We cannot kick them out. Kicking them out is not an option because at the end of the day, everything is trying to do what we are trying to do. It's survive and reproduce. The virus is trying to do that. The animals are trying to do that. We are trying to do that. We can't change this. This is the law of nature. The only thing that we can change is ourselves. The only thing that we can change is our interaction with the fellow beings that we share our planet with. The only thing that we can do is make sure that we take the necessary precautions and we do the necessary research to make sure that our health is not affected. Just remember, you could be the difference between everybody in your community getting infected with the virus and everybody in your community being safe. It's very easy to point a finger. Just remember that there's always 4 fingers pointing back at you, and this is something I firmly believe in. Wild animals aren't to blame. Your neighbor isn't to blame. The people at the wildlife market aren't to blame. They are supplying a demand. There's a demand for that kind of meat, and that's why they're supplying it. Pangolin trade is illegal in a lot of countries, yet it continues to happen for the purpose of ancient medicine and exotic meat, etc. We know it's bad for us. Why are we perpetuating such primitive beliefs? Why are we perpetuating such primitive practices? The only way to move forward is to make smart, educated decisions and to stop the cycle of blame. I hope this video has been educational, and I'm sure you have comments and I'm sure you have thoughts of your own. So feel free to drop a comment below and we can start a discussion as usual, or DM me, because that seems to be what people prefer to do, whether it's in my messenger inbox or whether it's down in the comment below or whether it's on my Instagram. I will see you soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you on Monday. Bye.